um, yeah, sorry, we're a couple minutes behind here, everybody. You know, a little technology seems to be giving me the gears a little bit today, but hopefully my camera will stay operating today and I don't have to unplug and plug it back in like I did earlier. Joined today, of course, by my good friend Vern. We had just got off a great interview with one of our team members, Carrie, who is an infinite banker herself and has joined the Ascendant organization and is learning all the key components. And she's going to be joining in to get her authorized practitioner program going as well, which is super exciting. And it's just so fun to see the organization grow, to see the great people that we have that we're attracting to join us, to become part of. I think the mission. I've been thinking a lot lately, Vern, about the mission, the idea of building the 10%. And I don't know if a lot of the people who, whether they're in our on our YouTube community group or in our Facebook community, they know what building the 10% means. What is that actually about? And I think there's a few things we could chat about today, but if you don't mind, I just kind of want to run with that a little bit. It's been in my mind a lot lately. And in fact, I was putting together a crazy spreadsheet the other day, looking at, over the next 25 years, what would need to happen in order for us to kind of hit that mark, get that level. And so just for our listeners, the idea of building the quote unquote 10% is really something that came from Carlos Lara, who is one of the board of directors of the Nelson Nash Institute. And he really recognized that, once you get 10% of a population, of a given population, all doing something, or they're embracing an idea or a concept, then that becomes a tipping point. It becomes an unstoppable force at that point, and it'll over the next, whatever period of time, it'll infuse its way out throughout the rest of that population base. So it's a great book by Malcolm Gladwell called The Tipping Point. He discusses that quite a bit. And that general idea is, okay, what if we could get 10% of the population in North America, so the US and Canada, embracing Nelson's ideals, embracing the concept of becoming your own banker and implementing it in their own life? I mean, it's a pretty big a goal. We would call it a big, hairy, audacious goal. And but these are the kinds of goals that matter. These are the things that revolutionize and shape the world. And so I'm proud of what we're doing now to help further that objective. And I know that as we go forward in time, if we keep our sights on that ultimate objective, we can do even so much more. And so I've been thinking about it a great deal. And the idea of building the 10% from the Nelson Nash Institute's format is really if we can get 10% of the financial advisors, 10% of the financial professionals in North America embracing it first, implementing it in their own life, and then sharing their stories and bringing it to their client base. That's the quickest kind of path to get to that end result. And I think I was thinking about this. One thing that Dan Sullivan, my coach, a strategic coach, and again with Nelson, he says it's all about how you think. And so I was thinking about my thinking, or ruminating on this one idea. And I thought, what I've noticed as a bit of a trend, and just from my perspective, is that the people that are really embracing and getting attracted to Nelson's message, and then also wanting to share it with other people, I'm finding are more and more and more simply the clients of the different authorized practitioners that are just so enamored and in love with this process and what it's doing in their own lives, and how it's revolutionizing and shaping their life, and the financial peace and security and joy that they're creating because of it, that they are being more proactive and saying, I just really want to, like, I'm just talking about this all the time. I can't shut up about it. And
I know, right?
I just need to figure out, I need to get coached to figure out how to do this so I can help more people. I just really want to help people. This is something I'm really passionate about. And so rather than trying to get 10% of the existing, advisor community that's already out in place doing it, what if we were to instead focus on getting, 10%, 20% of the existing clients that are already embracing this? And I'm talking about, not just our clients, but, our colleagues in Canada, our colleagues down in the United States who are avid, supporters of Nelson's message, and they're embracing and teaching it the way that Nelson intended. And we see that kind of a natural buildup of people who, they don't have, not to, throw anyone under the bus or anything, but they don't have the past historic, learning that the financial industry has shaped for them over a number of years that we
Right.
kind of almost have to not purge, but there's some unlearning that needs to take place so that you can really forge ahead down this concept of thinking like a banker.
It's been said that the currency of the future is the ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn.
Mm.
Right. But sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, Rich. But we were talking on the last call with Carrie in our interview. We were talking about thinking long range, and we're talking about, so if you think about way back, and I'm not going down the rabbit hole of conspiracy or whatever, but when they started to create things like, well, life insurance, when they started to create things like the Canadian Income Tax Act, when they started to pitch the idea of having a federal bank, like nobody was really attracted to that. That is the truth. Everybody knew that that probably wasn't in their best interest, but they found ways to convince the public that it was a good idea. People indoctrinated it, and now look, long range, 100 years later, that's just how it is. It's just like totally normal, right? And if you think long range, and there's a certain, I don't want to name drop here, but there are carriers, let's say, that we work with that are starting to, this process is starting to get their attention. They're starting to embrace and understand what it is that we're actually doing. And they're starting to see like, oh, your clients are taking out big policies. Your clients are accessing policy loans. Your clients are actually paying those policy loans back. Hey guys, where is that money coming from? And we're going, look, the money is already there. It's already flowing. The clients are just redirecting it back to you so that you have more capital to put to work to grow more profit so you can share with everybody. Isn't that good? And they go, so think about the trillions and trillions of dollars that is already always flowing through the commercial banking system. Just imagine if we could just embrace that energy. Everybody just continues to do what they're already doing, takes one extra step by changing the process, getting some policies in place, getting good coaching, getting the lesson, embracing the process. And now 10, 20, 50, 100 years later, more of that volume is actually flowing to the insurance business that we all co-own and we all get to benefit from. Just imagine the ripple effect of what's possible from that. It just like blows my mind and inspires the hell out of me, man.
Well, and I love that, and I love your vision and the way that you kind of hit those bullet points and kind of took us to that 10, 20, 50, 100 years, jump right away, because it's like, wow, when you go from 10 and then 20 and then 50 and 100, the gap between those things is really dramatic. But when you say them quickly, like your brain leapfrogs to, oh, what would that look like? Like you automatically explode the value and the number in your head, which I think is really good. I love how you kind of did that, Vern. What's really interesting about that even further is there was no requirement to ask permission of any governing body to go and implement that process. You can personally implement impactful, positive financial change in your own life, and you can voluntarily choose to do it. You don't need to ask permission from anybody other than the insurance company to approve the body. And if your body is not the one that gets improved, we find another body. Okay. It's a spouse, it's a kid, it's a business partner, it's a real estate joint venture partner. You know, generally speaking, it's been very rare where we've ran into this person who doesn't have another quote unquote body that they can develop an insurable interest in. It does happen, but it's not very common. And so when you make that voluntary disconnect, imagine you're plugged into the grid. You're plugged in right now to the banking system. You've got, your house has power lines coming into it to the electrical box, and you've got a power meter, and they're tracking your usage and your consumption. Just like people want to go and get their house off the grid and they want to go do solar and sell power back to the grid and all these kinds of things. All you want to do is just disconnect from that system, and you're plugging into this system. It already has all the same features and benefits, but you get more control and autonomy, and you get ownership now. And so that's really what we're doing. And so the beautiful thing about this, again, going back to the 10%, is what are some of the societal benefits of making this happen? And so this is what I've been thinking a lot on, again, thinking about my thinking. And one of the things that we have to worry about, of course, is we pay tax. We pay a lot of taxes. There's nothing wrong inherently with taxes, and that there's services that we need. We just have a high expectation. At least I have it. I think I do. And I think a lot of Canadians have a high expectation of what those tax dollars are meant to provide for us. And then how are they being utilized and spent? And I may have differences of opinion with how they're presently being utilized and spent. And perhaps some of our listeners do. That's okay. So I don't have control over that. The only way I can control it is maybe once every couple of years with a vote. And that's about as much as I can participate. And I can write a letter to my MP and etc. But one of the things that we have taxation for is to support a lot of social related programs, and we want to provide, we're all good-hearted people. We want people to be well and be looked after and make sure that they're healthy and that they have the services that they need to thrive. And there's people that need different kinds of services, but a lot of times those services can be provided in other ways. And so just thinking about this right here, when somebody passes, when somebody dies, there's a huge amount of not only emotional turmoil and strife, there's a ton of cost, and there's an awful lot of baggage that has to be taken care of. And when we think about those costs, there's creditors, there's needs, there's income support for the remaining spouse, kids. These are things that need to happen. We see this all the time because we see GoFundMe pages that show up because somebody unfortunately passes prematurely. Nobody wants that to happen. And, you're not going to talk to somebody that they want that to be the case. Nobody does. We all want to help other people out. And the way that we should be doing that as a society is doing it through insurance, because for pennies on the dollar, you can get dollars back out. And it's a really amazing thing, because it was all designed to support exactly this need. There was a need for insurance determined a very, very long time ago to help people out, and it provides that social good. It's people working together through a mutual pool that's well managed on behalf of everyone to solve these kinds of problems. And if we have more people with good quality insurance that'll be there at every stage of your life, and we're now supporting a multi-generational impact in a system, then some of the needs, quote unquote, the needs to depend on a tax-based or a social program related system diminishes. So if we're replacing our needs through the mutual pool in a mutually profitable way, we're being profitable along our lifespan, we have utilization. Sooner or later, bad things happen. Somebody passes away. So maybe that's, again, whether it's a critical illness or a disability event, there's other insurance needs that solve those problems, not just limiting things to the infinite banking space here. But if we have these programs in place, we don't have to go and ask and depend on the government related system that's being built up to support that need. And if we remove our demand from there, and we're creating a demand where we now co-own the insurance company, we're now being mutually profitable with everybody. The more and more of that happens, the less and less that we need all this other stuff. And so imagine now you go 25, 50, 100 years out of that buildup, you get 10% of a population doing this. How much did we just solve a whole bunch of societal problems because we voluntarily chose to be profitable with our own insurance? And we want to vote with our dollars by moving them into an environment that is outside, that's a private contract, it's voluntary, free contract. No one forces you to do it. You get to secede from a system that isn't always there to support you. You have guaranteed cash accumulation. You have co-ownership of the lender that you get to do business with. I mean, I just feel like I'm hitting checkboxes and checkboxes and checkboxes. But we're talking about really powerful things.
No, Rich, I love the thinking. You're absolutely right. And in turn, how much pressure will that actually take off the system as well, right? Because people become more independent, and we're all mutually benefiting, to your point. And you talk about building the 10%, we talk about that whole 10, 20, 30 years down the road. Just imagine how many families deal with financial problems and the COVID-19s of the world and the economic downturns and the deaths and all those things, and they have nowhere to turn to. They have no resources. They can't get a loan from the bank per se, stuff like that. And the family, 9 times out of 10, good, strong, supporting family, they actually want to help, but they don't have the resources to help. Well, what's that going to look like when the entire family is embracing this process? The entire neighborhood, the entire city, the entire province, the entire country, people start to embrace this process, and people have more access to capital to take advantage of opportunities, but they also have more access to capital to fulfill that banking function when other resources, social programs, commercial bank, selling your house, whatever it is, those options aren't available to you. All of a sudden, you have just a more self-sustaining, autonomous system, family, problem-solving mechanism that you can just pull the trigger on right away to support each other even more. And we can't make problems go away. We can't make it premature death or cancer or economic downturns. We can't make all that stuff go away. But it's like my football coach told me when I was in high school, Rich, he said, Vern, money doesn't buy happiness, but it sure makes life a hell of a lot easier. And that's what we're talking about here. When you have the resources that you need to take advantage of an opportunity or solve a problem, it's just like, okay, great. Now you're already looking at the lesson from the problem that showed up versus how the heck am I going to solve the thing? We can just solve the problem and move on with life and keep the train rolling, right?
Yeah, and I think, sometimes people don't always recognize really what insurance is, and at its fundamental core, like, we don't have to, I'm not talking about life insurance or just in general broad scope terms, insurance. These are organizations and companies that they're in the business of managing risk. That's what they do. They
Yep.
manage risk. They sell products that are actuarially sound and calculated so that they can manage that risk effectively. And whether it's travel insurance because you're going on a flight and you're worried about your baggage, getting lost or whatever, well, that's a term insurance for the term of the flight, the voyage that you go, right? So that's something you might pay for, or trip cancellation insurance. Again, it's just a management of risk situation. Now, one thing I think is helpful for people to understand, because most people that own a home, you have fire and insurance on your home, or for sewer backups, and like home insurance for replacement value, because it's really important to do that. Homes are very expensive, especially in Canada. So I grew up in a very small community, Vern. That was the thriving metropolis of Hay Lakes, Alberta, a population of about 300 people, give or take. We used to say 300 with one in the oven or whatever. Was a make some jokes about that. But so again, I just picture a small town that you've driven by, or that or you grew up in. Now, in that town, so I'll just use 300 as a number. Let's say there's a population of about 300 people. Well, everyone on that town, there was a volunteer fire department. But when you went to get fire insurance on your house, because of volunteer fire department, it wasn't like you called 911 whenever, and it's like the closest major center is quite a little bit farther away, you would pay a higher amount of home insurance, even though you might have a cheaper home because it's in a smaller community. The insurance to insure that home is higher because it might be harder to manage some of the risks. Does that kind of make
Right.
sense? So it's all
Absolutely. Yeah.
calculated based on that geographical situation. So hypothetically, I've got I've got a home that's worth whatever. I'll just say I use a lot of threes here, $300,000, and my neighbor John has a home that's also worth $300,000. And then there's a few more people along the way. Well, John's my neighbor. John's a buddy of mine. We're at a small town. We walk by each other in the street. We walk our dogs together. We say hello. Our kids go to the same school because there's only one school in town. And we play on the playground, like all that stuff. We know each other well. He comes over for a barbecue regularly. Now, when I say a neighbor, he might live across town because it's a small town. Like, that's still a neighbor when you're in a small town. If that makes sense. Now,
Absolutely.
because John's my buddy and my friend and my neighbor, I don't want to see if something happens to John's house and his house burns down. Man, I'm going to be devastated. I'm going to do everything I can. I'm going to make a casserole. I don't know how to make a casserole. Maybe I'll ask my wife to make a casserole. Like, we'll do something to try and support. We'll get them some blankets and all those things that people do in a crisis situation. But I don't have the resources to go and necessarily help rebuild John's house. So what used to happen before insurance is, like, the whole group of people would ideally get together. You had friends and colleagues and members of your church and stuff, and you'd grab your hammers and you'd take a day away from the field and you'd try to get some supplies together and you'd try to build a new house for these people so that they had a home to live in. Like, that's kind of how the community would rally around one another. Well, then the idea of insurance came about, where you could start to replace this value if everyone just jointly contributes into the pool for a number of years. We don't know whose house it's going to be, whether it's John's house or my house. At some point in time, someone's house is going to burn down. Someone's going to have a catastrophic event in that house, and it's going to need to be replaced. And $300,000 is going to need to show up, give or take, to complete that objective. Well, now John's not out there on the wind all by himself with his family having to come up with the 300,000. Instead, he can pay about $1,000 a year, and I pay $1,000 a year, and everyone in the town pays $1,000 a year, so that none of us has to pay 300 grand. That's the power of insurance. So it's much easier, much cheaper for me to just pay $1,000 a year, knowing that I have that protection. It may not happen. That risk was probably really low that I'll have a house burned down, and I hope it's low for John. But boy, oh boy, when it happens, we're all looked after because we are participating in that interaction, that voluntary free contract. Now, that's just one micro example. And now imagine you took that example and you embraced it in life insurance, and you co-own the company. If the company was profitable, they share their profits with you. That's what we're talking about here. Now, in my little example of a community, small community of 300 people, what if we added a zero onto it? Okay, now it's 3,000 people. And what if we added a zero onto that? Now it's 30,000 people. Everyone here on the watching probably knows a town of 30,000 people. Now, what if we added a zero onto that? Now it's 300,000 people. Perfect. Let's add another zero. Now we're at 3 million. And on and on and on. We're just going to keep adding zeros to the amount of people that we're serving connected to that same pool of financial energy. And we're all, working with the economy of scale. We're paying a little bit for a massive benefit, and we get that utilization. Again, I just think it's so powerful. What Nelson put together was a way for you to be personally and directly financially profitable throughout your lifetime and have more control by seceding from the rest of the financial world and doing it without asking permission. You don't need to ask anyone's permission to do it. You just got to get started. And the more we embrace that and the more people that embrace it, the more powerful this whole thing becomes. And we all get to participate and share in that value and the societal benefits that come with it.
Oh, Rich, I love it. I love the thinking, by the way. A couple things, not that we have to go back there, but what you said about clients embracing this process and practicing it and creating their own story, and then all of a sudden saying, gosh, I've been sharing this with my brother and my friend and my colleagues, and now 2 other people have started. There's a lot of clients who ask us, of course, we're not a recruiting agency or anything like that. That's not what we do, but we are actively building our team and building the 10%. Like, yeah, it's great if other advisors embrace it and start to practice it and coach other people. But these clients who come in and they've practiced for 2, 3, 5 years and they've got other people involved and they've all produced results, what a story that they can bring to the conversation should they decide to actually make that career change and get involved and start coaching people. That's one thing that I wanted to just touch base on. And just the other thing that you were talking about that ripple effect long term and what could be possible with people embracing this process. And it all reminds me of I don't think I didn't create this, and I might have even heard you say it before, but we all talk about like, the global economy and the national economy and the local economy. And when do you ever hear people talk about your own personal economy? I have my own personal economy, right? I create revenue, I pay taxes, I serve clients, I do all those things. I earn income, I make deposits, right? And I have ability to take action to create more income or create different results if I want to. And then I got to put that cash somewhere. Well, I put it into my own personal economic management system called my infinite banking system, my system of policies. And I put money in those policies, and I put it at a company that is managing that money, that has an amazing track record, that is extremely conservative. It's all actuarially calculated, and every single day, whether I like it or not, my personal economy actually improves and gets stronger, and it actually has more value every single day, just by virtue of how the system works. It's really not that complicated. Everybody gets all freaked out about money and wealth and what's going to happen in the future, and it's all the stuff we mentioned on our last call, the things that you can't control. If you just start to embrace and take responsibility and focus on what you can actually control and what you can do, which is what the process of becoming your own banker is all about. It's all about what you can do. And it has nothing to do with a product. Again, I keep referring to the last recording we had. That's exactly what you said in the last recording. The product is just a tool. It's all about you learning and educating yourself and getting creative and rethinking your thinking and deciding about things that you can do today to have an impact on the unborn grandkids or great grandkids or great grandkids that I will never have the opportunity to meet. Just think, Rich, what would have been possible for you and your family today if not only you had the wealth and the capital available, but you actually had the principles, the values, the lessons available to you 150, 170 years ago when whole life insurance was invented or available here in Canada. Just imagine your earliest descendants that came to Canada. Imagine they had policies. Imagine they were aware of this process. Imagine they were using the insurance company's money to achieve the objectives, and for generations, boom, and all of a sudden Richard shows up and you're just this savvy, wealthy, grounded guy who still knows the value of work, and the value of of control and what you can do. And your family has this robust family banking system that's literally been multiplying for the last 150 years. I mean, what kind of an impact would you be able to make given your brain and how I know your brain works? What would be possible for you and your family? And I don't expect you to answer that, but that's the kind of thing I think about my unborn great grandkid. I'm like, that kid's going to have the values and the principles, not the silver spoon. He's going to have the values and the principles, or she, but they're going to have the resources to focus on a life that actually matters to them. I get so frustrated and annoyed. You know this, Rich. The reason why I'm in this business is because I want people to have a good life. It doesn't matter how much money you have. I say this to my kids all the time. I go, look, I will finance your life for the rest of your life if you're doing something that matters to you. If you're doing something that is economy or people plus, if you're doing something that's adding value and making a difference in the world and you're passionate about it, I don't give a crap if you make $1. You don't need to make $1, because that's why I show up every day, is to put my kids in a position to live that kind of a life. And that's what's possible for everybody. So you talked about getting off the grid. Like, just think about the ripple effect, the impact. If people weren't worried about keeping the friggin' lights on and servicing their credit card bill and worried about the interest rate, like if they had the resources available to live life on their terms and actually go out and do something that made a difference, like that's what gets me fired up in the morning.
I love that, Vern. And in fact, you talking about the what if scenario, what if, past generations of my family had done A, B, and C. And I think that's a really good question for people to chew on, because consider it for a minute. What could have been different in your life? How might your life be different right now, today, whatever the age is that you are? Think about the opportunities that have come through your life that you were able to do and the ones you weren't able to do. What if you could have capitalized on all those because of what your parents and grandparents had done that led you to that objective? You still had access to a system that had been rippling over generations. And, I will say this, and it is actually something that I think is tremendously amazing, is that, I have a amazing amount of, both love and respect for my mom, because she actually took, some of that, what it's called the Canada Child Benefit now, but the much earlier version of that when I was, a little lad. And she had committed that for myself and my two siblings. And I don't know at what age she started, but it was probably somewhere when I was like maybe 6 years old or something to that effect. And she didn't know it was Parkinson's law, but she says, look, she understood that the government giveth and the government can taketh away. So she never wanted to become dependent on that source. And so she committed to putting it aside and saving it for us. But she didn't just save it. She then started to learn some skills around investing. And so at the time, very popular, talking about in the mid late 80s and 90s, she started learning, and she was listening to tapes and whatever on mutual funds. And so she would be investing in mutual funds, and she was kind of watching it and all that sort of stuff. And so in her mind, she had compartmentalized that money. So it wasn't hers or the family's, it was individually siloed for each of the kids. And that's what we do find happens with parents, is that they silo chunks of capital aside and they stick in their little buckets, and they're never to kind of be touched. Right. And so the reality is there's probably some things that maybe they might have suffered out on as far as what they could have been doing with money because of that. But this capital wasn't touched. It was growing. It was being invested in something. And so, when I roughly around the age of 12, they decided they wanted to get into investment real estate. And so in order to do that, the funding source was going to come from some of these silos for that original down payment. And so I remember having a family meeting around the table. And
cool.
It was my mom was like convincing everyone, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go buy this piece of real estate. And I was dead set against it. Man, I was pretty belligerent as a kid, because I was a big saver, and I thought I recognized the value of like having this, and like, what if it disappears and what if it's gone? And so I was kind of against it. And I also didn't like change at that time. I'm a very different person today. But we ended up proceeding, going forward. And it was kind of like we all would agree that we were going to do this, because she had individually said, this is really your guys' money, but we're going to use it for this purpose, and we want you on board. So I was actually listed as a beneficial interest on title to that first piece of real estate. And then I got to start learning about managing real estate, cleaning it up, painting and fixing, and all kinds of horror. I could tell lots of horror stories. We don't have time for that. But the end result is that that's where the capital resource came from. Then she continued to invest it, over those years. Then when that property paid out, it was roughly around when I was, I think I was about 17 years old. It was near around when I was about to turn 18. That property paid out. I got my share of the value back out. We didn't really make a lot of money. We kind of made a little bit, but not too much. We just didn't lose anything. We lost time working on the property. So we didn't really get paid for our time, but we got the expertise. We got the experience. All right. When it all came out and was done, and then there was some more left, where she kind of let me take over the reins on that. And literally I was buying another property with my parents about 3-4 months later and
Wow.
taking those values and putting it back to work. Now, I mention all that because in reflection, if I think back to, okay, what if this information, Nelson's book, had come into their life? I believe, that had they had this context at that time, it's the kind of thing that probably my parents would have embraced if they knew that. I feel like that is the case. And, now if they would have been putting that into a policy, well, now shooting forward today, I'm about to cross the 41 barrier here at the time of this recording. What would that buildup look like?
Yeah.
That $10,000 or $12,000 that I had available maybe at around age 18, give or take. Well, that would probably be 50 grand now or greater. And it wouldn't have been like this, a massive return. That wouldn't have been the purpose. The purpose would have been consistent, guaranteed compounding growth. And all the other properties and the property renovations and the things that I've done over that period of time, courses that I've invested money into to help learn and grow my skill set. If I could have been using that tool and replenishing that tool because I had the skill sets, man, I can only imagine what opportunities I would have been able to capitalize on had that been the case. Now, nothing wrong happened in the situation, but taking a moment to reflect on what could have been gives me a pause and context to think about what can be moving forward.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was powerful, Rich. Really good. And the key thing in that, though, is to your exact point, what can be moving forward. And then now it's, again, goes back to that taking action, right? Taking action and learning from that history of momentum.
Yeah, I was listening to one of the Nelson clips that we've got coming out. It's still to be released on our playlist of Nelson Nash stuff. You can go to learnfromnelson.com and see the playlist there. And it's also on our Bankers Vault YouTube channel. But he was saying, he made a comment as one gentleman was leaving the room in this particular event. And it's like, well, first, if in order to learn to swim, you got to get in the water. And he's like, yeah, when the boat's leaving the dock, you got to decide, are you in or out of the boat? And so I feel like that's where a lot of people are, and they're at a stage of learning in their journey. And right now, again, we're dealing with all this market turmoil. Rogers went out the other day. That created all kinds of chaos for people and how their dependency on the system. Well, start taking your dependency on everyone else's system away from that system and start implementing that so you can become independent using your own system.
Yeah, so powerful. Thanks, Rich. You're awesome, man.
All right, brother. Appreciate you. Have an amazing rest of your day. And for our watchers, our listeners, make sure you tune into the next video. It's going to be popping up soon. And thanks for being with us and continue your journey of learning.